Many of us would have heard about the famous analogy derived from the ancient Indian Hindu scriptures about the chariot. Now, in this analogy, there is a chariot, there are horses, there are reins, there is a charioteer, the sarathi, and of course, there is the rider. And most of us normally associate it with those iconic images at the battle of Mahabharata with the Gita ka Gyan, where Lord Krishna himself is giving the Gita Upadesh to none other than Arjun. However, this analogy actually is derived from Kathopanishad. Upanishads are arguably between 500 to 600 years before Christ, whereas the Bhagwad Gita, the most accepted date is about 300 years before Christ. So, this actually predates definitely the Gita Upadesh, the part of Bhagwad Gita which forms the core of the epic Mahabharata by at least a couple of hundred of years. Now, what is this analogy which is very useful? So, any person who is seeking to understand his own self, Atam Jnanam. So, whether Atam is in the sense of the I, me, myself, my core substratum, or whether that I is the Atma, let us not get into that for the moment, but any person who is trying to understand what he is, for him this analogy is really very instructive. Now, this, of course, that is another story for another day perhaps, is, as we said, derived from Kathopanishad, and it is actually a form of a dialogue between Nachiketa, a 12-year-old boy, and Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, and it is in form of a dialogue, but that is another story for another day. But on the question of the little boy, who is actually a very evolved personality, and under some circumstances, Yamaraj has given him 3 boons. So, in the third boon, the boy asks a very fundamental question to Yamaraj: what happens to a person after death? Yamaraj is quiet. He said, Devtas like Indra, Varun, they have been trying to seek this answer, they have not got it. But the boy said, please answer me this. You have given me the boons, he has exhausted the earlier 2 boons, and this third boon is left for him. Yamaraj is quiet. He says, you will get kingdoms, you will get long life, you will get most beautiful wives, you will have sons and grandsons who live for hundreds of years. Why do you want to ask this question? But the boy is adamant. And Yamaraj, of course, is bound by his commitment. So, it is in this 4 or 5 verses that really forms the core of what do I stand for, and how do you actually segregate your sense of self from your body, from your mind, from your intellect. Normally, we associate ourselves with our body, we also try and associate with our sense organs, we also associate with our Budhi and Vivek, and we also try and understand with the mental faculties, our man. But this is a beautiful analogy, a lot of literature is available, but it takes some effort to understand it. The first few steps are pretty simple, but when you have to actually graduate from man, mind oblique mental faculties, and then you have to graduate to Budhi and Vivek, which is your intellect, that transition becomes very difficult. Let us try to see whether we can present it to our viewers in a simplified form. What is a chariot? Chariot is nothing but your body. So, therefore, your soul, your Atma, your core self, if it has to traverse this journey of life, it cannot but do it in this humanly body. So, chariot has to be in good shape physically, if you want to have a nice smooth ride. So chariot is the personification of your body. What drives the chariot? The horses. The 4 horses, not 5 horses. I'll come to that subtle distinction. Horses are the one who actually are providing traction and energy and locomotion to where this body is going. They are the prime mover, so to say, in raw physics sense of the term. So the chariot is the body. So what are the horses? Horses are your 5 senses. Sense of sight, hearing, taste, touch and smell. And why 4 horses? You try and put a 5th horse, they'll try and pull each other in a different direction. You try and put the 5th horse in front, he'll confuse the other 4 also. So in some of the scriptures, we regard the taste and touch literally as one sense, and therefore there are 4 senses. So irrespective, the horses are your senses. You interact with the outside world through these senses. You see, you hear, you smell, you touch, you taste. That is your vehicle of communication of your core self with the outside world. So these are the horses, the chariot and the horses. So far so good. Now which side would the horses go? If the horses are not given a sense of direction, the senses would wander here and there. You smell good food, you'll rush into the kitchen to grab those chocolates, and you see something, you may switch on to nice fancy movie and waste your time. You may smell the aroma of flowers, see beautiful things in the garden, and you may wander there and leaving the priority items behind. So senses have this inherent tendency of wandering away from the path, like the horses of the chariot would do. So you wouldn't know where the chariot would ultimately land up because the senses are pulling in different directions. So who's going to control these 5 senses? Your mind, man, your mental faculties. So you are going to use your mind as reins to control your senses. Your mind is telling you, read this, focus onto the smaller font, look at a distance, hark, do I hear something? The frequency response of the eye or the ear remains the same. But if your mind is telling you to concentrate and to focus, then you lose sight of the numerous distractions that abound this planet, which beset your journey, and you control those senses and bring them to the path on which you want to trudge and traverse, and hopefully have a smooth ride on your chariot. So the body is the chariot, the senses are the horses, and horses are controlled by the reins, your mind, your man, your mental faculties. But now you come to the charioteer. The reins are not going to be pulled automatically. In fact, if the reins are too tight, too loose, you're pulling them in contradictory directions. Senses would also go helter-skelter. Mind is, our Shastras say, like a monkey. It is jumping from here to there. So you have to control the monkey mind. And it is your Budhi and Vivek, your intellect, that is going to help you focus. Your thinking power, your logic, your mathematical calculation, etc., can be used to obtain the wrong objectives. You may be a computer programmer, you may be trying to hack the code of the bank. Your man and your senses organs are going to be guided by the man. But should a right thinking individual be doing it? Is that why you are there on this planet? Is this your ultimate purpose, to rob the bank using those wonderful faculties, mental faculties, the great mind which you have, assisted by your sense organs? No. So intellect, Budhi and Vivek, discerning decisions, that is what Lord Krishna talks about. It is not only mere and blind obedience and doing your duty in the mechanical sense, discerning decisions so that you not only take the consequences of those decisions, but also you steer along the path of dharma that you've chosen for yourself. Swadharma, not the dharma that has been superimposed onto you. So from reins, which is your mind, which is a man, mental faculties, to the charioteer, your Budhi, Vivek, your intellect. But who is the rider? Ultimately, all this chariot, all these horses, these reins, and the charioteer that you've hired, the chauffeur of your car, that is meant for the rider. That is you. And you, as in your Atman, the core self, the core inner substratum. Your body is not you. Your mind is not you. We can easily distinguish. You can see the body, but something inside you, the sense of I, that is not your body. Your senses, you hear, you communicate with the outside world with those senses, but that is not you. Similarly, you think, thoughts come and go like ripples in your mind. That is not you, you can perceive them. Your intellect, telling you the right and wrong, your core values. But that is not you. Your values may change, may have the tendency to change. There may be forces inside you that may be tempting you to change. So the core substratum is you, the rider. So often we confuse between the intellect and the rider, the charioteer and the rider, between the intellect and the Atman. And I think most of it is because we associate Lord Krishna as being the charioteer, and Arjun, the rider, is seen as an inferior form. Of course, there is another interpretation to that, we'll come to that. But you have hired the taxi, you have employed the driver. The driver cannot be drunk, he cannot be sleeping. So therefore, your Buddhi and Vivek has to be constantly alert. Andin jage. You have to constantly shun the various temptations that might come to you, because you are the Atman and you have to ultimately control. It's your journey, not the journey of the charioteer. So you as Atman are the rider. But remember, the Atman, your core self, through this body-mind complex, aided by the senses and by your mind, the mental faculties, your intellect, Buddhi and Vivek, are traversing this journey of life. You may choose the path of pleasure, which would lead to an eventual normal death and a cycle of birth and rebirth. You may, on the other hand, follow the path of a Karam Yogi, follow your inner dharma, and ultimately, if you are sincere, this Atma may merge with the Paramatma, the omniscient soul, the Param Atma, releasing you from this vicious cycle of births and rebirths. But the analogy, friends, was essentially to tell you that this body is a chariot. Nobody's case that you shouldn't pay attention to your body. If the chariot is rickety, you won't have a smooth ride, a longer ride if your body is fit. Keen senses, take care of your senses, but use them in a proper direction for proper purpose. Don't let them go with a roving eye hither and thither. And who controls that? Your mind. You can control your mind with meditation. And similarly, your Buddhi and Vivek, intelligence, intellect, it may be a God gift. But if you focus, if distractions are taken care of, even intelligence can increase with focus and concentration. And the inner core is you, the Atma. You are the rider. Everything else belongs to you, but are not you, and you are not them. So this distinction is very important, friends, in this analogy. As far as Mahabharata is concerned, Arjun, as you know, handed over the reins to Lord Krishna, and Lord Krishna was none other than the manifestation of the omniscient God through the human avatar of Lord Vishnu. And therefore, under those exceptional circumstances, having received the Gita ka Gyan, and Lord Krishna, of course, the all-knowing, including the war techniques, strategies and tactics, was holding the reins and taking that physical horse, which is also a kind of way of saying that he had said, I will rely on your Budhi and Vivek, because he trusted the charioteer there. But in our everyday life, that is not to be the case. Your Atman is to take care and be guided by your own intellect. Even in the civil service, they say, you will act in accordance with your best judgment. That is a part and parcel of every conduct rules. So friends, to summarize, this is a beautiful analogy. The chariot being the body, the senses, the horses, the reins are your mind and mental faculties, the intellect, the buddhi, vivek, discerning, intelligence, intellect. But the core substratum which you are trying to reach, the Atam Jnanam, understanding that you are different from your body, different from your senses, different from your mind, different from your intellect. That is you. And make sure that you choose the right path on this planet so that you fulfill the ultimate purpose of this human life, which is to do good, leave a good legacy, and ultimately merge with the Paramatma. I hope you liked this little talk. And if you think this could be useful for your friends, young and old, please do not hesitate to comment, share, and like. And I'll be coming with further smaller talks like this in future as well. Namaskaram.